I remember this like it was just yesterday. It was heavily raining. It was just a couple of years ago, and it was the day just after my 17th birthday. I've never been allowed to wear makeup or shave my legs. That wasn't until I was 17 years old. That was the rules. Mum always said that sort of thing is for adults, and it encourages sexualization when you're trying to look pretty. So there's no reason for children to do it. Of course, I was the only one at my school at the time not being allowed to do these things, so I was very excited that my time had finally come. The rules were now going to start to be more relaxed. Mum and I had parked close to the store's entrance. We had to make a mad dash for the doors through some very heavy rain. On the run in, I noticed a homeless-looking man standing outside the store under a small overhanger, being sheltered from the rain. But it was only a mere moment glance before we went through the doors, and Mum and I were laughing to each other about how heavy the rain had just gotten. I remember the conversation we were having. Mum was telling me she would prefer me to look at eyeshadows and mascaras rather than lipsticks and lip liners, because it's a positive psychological effect to make people look into your eyes when they're talking to you. They take you more seriously, she said, and it has a very opposite effect if they're looking at your mouth. My mother had very strong opinions, not just on this, but everything in life. She said there's a lot of unspoken little cues, to the way you move, to the way that you style your hair, that say a lot about a person. I loved my mother a lot. I'm not sure if everything that she said was completely fact, but what I do know is that she believed it, and everyone around her seemed to respect her. And so did I. I revered her. We were just getting into a discussion over colour choices when I saw the dirty man again. He was at the opposite end of the store. He wasn't moving. He was just looking over at us, over the short display units. I thought this was a little bit unusual, that someone was staring at us so intently, so I interrupted Mum mid-sentence and pointed him out to her. She looked at him for a good moment before I saw her brow furrow, and she started to pack up all of the items that we gathered, and she made us go quickly through the checkout. We rushed back to the car through the rain, and we jumped in. As she started the car and we were pulling out, I saw him again at the door, just looking at us as we left the car park. I turned to Mum and I asked if she knew the man. She said that she didn't, but she got bad vibes from him, and that if I ever saw him again, to never let him get close to me. I was to get somewhere to safety, and to never engage him in conversation. We drove home in silence, and the more it sunk in that his behaviour was very strange. I also wasn't sure if I believed my mum about not knowing him. I just didn't understand why he would follow us and watch us leave. Everything was very confusing to me at the time. A few weeks after, I saw him again. He was out on our street. He was sitting at a sheltered bus stop. The bus stop sat about 5 houses up from ours and across the road. I was walking home from school when I saw him. He was looking in the direction of our house very intently. I was coming from the opposite direction from the way that he was looking, so he didn't see me. His attention was very focused on the house, so I turned around and I went down a side street. I went in the back way. The street behind us had a little walking path that went along our neighbour's house and ended up in a little space between our 2 houses. It wasn't big at all, just enough room for us to manoeuvre our rubbish bins and pull them to the street. Dad was sitting in the kitchen reading some pamphlet with a stack of unopened letters beside him when I came in the back door. He was surprised to see me enter that way, and he expressed as much. I told him all about the man at the bus stop, and that I thought he was looking at our house. And then I told him about our original encounter with this man at the store. From the start of the story to the end, my father's face was slowly draining in colour. He never spoke a word or interrupted me. At the end, he nodded and then stood and walked his way to the front door. I found myself trailing after him, and as we got to the door, it was only a few seconds that we could see him sitting there and looking in our direction. before the bus blocked our view. He must have gotten on it too, because as the bus pulled away, the man was gone. Dad was quiet as he went back to the kitchen, his head sunk in thought. I sat down with him, and like a curious teen, I started rapidly firing off questions. Who is he? Do you know him? Does Mum know him? How do you know him? Why is he watching our house? Dad grabbed my hand at this stage and squeezed them. I quieted and he said, no. We do not know who this man is, but under no circumstances are you to be in his presence. If you ever encounter him, do exactly as you did today. You're to avoid being seen by him at all costs, and you're never to engage in conversation. If you ever see him, you're to run away from this man. My father praised my quick thinking about taking the back street today, and told me that if I wanted, I could sneak some of the ice cream if I ate it quickly before Mum came home and didn't tell her. I didn't consider myself a child anymore. Something felt off, something felt wrong. I had stranger danger drilled into me from a very early age, as far back as I could remember. But it wasn't only that. I felt someone was lying. I didn't know if my mother knew him or my father, or maybe they had a history or went to school with this man or something. I wasn't sure, but something felt weird, and it felt like bad news. In the weeks following, I didn't see him at all, but our house started to get some security upgrades. A brand new security system was installed. Some builders came and ripped down our cute little white picket fence, replaced it with this giant automatic gaudy gate for the cars. I hated it. I thought it was the ugliest thing. Mum tried to make me feel better about it, saying it increased our property value, which would be a great thing when it comes time to sell. I didn't feel better about that. I was very focused on the word sell, and I got incredibly upset. I'd lived in this house all my life, and I had loved it. I didn't want to move. I liked my school. I liked my friends. I got so upset that I had a little tantrum. I stomped off to my room. Later that night, my father came up to console me. He said that we weren't selling the house. It's just always good to improve things on the off chance that we did so we could get more money for it. Things were rather calm for some months after that, and I had almost put it all out of my mind when Mum and Dad said that they needed a date night. With all the security that they had now had installed, they thought I'd be fine on my own. They left for dinner and I sat myself up on the couch for a cozy movie night, some popcorn and ice cream. And the security light turned on. I had the blinds shut, so I couldn't see what turned them on, but they lit up. I looked over at the coffee table and noticed that the tablet had also woken itself up and was now showing the camera displays in a little 6-way grid. I hadn't learned how to use it, but I went and retrieved it and sat back on the couch and had a look at it. I didn't know how to rewind, but I didn't see anything suspicious on the cameras at the moment. I laughed at myself, told me I was being silly. It was obviously a cat or a raccoon or something. Came and turned the security light on. And then, blink, off it went. I put the tablet down and resumed my movie. The next morning when I woke up and had breakfast with Dad, he asked me what happened the night before. It took me a moment to understand what he was talking about. I explained that an animal had come and turned the security light on and scared me a little. I laughed and explained that at least we knew it worked. He just smiled at me and agreed. Yes, it is a good one, he says. I'm glad we know it works. A few weeks later, I was woken in the middle of the night to my parents having one of their whisper arguments with each other. It was what they did instead of yelling and screaming at each other when they fought. They would just wait until they thought I was asleep, and they would have these strange little loud whisper fights. I never enlightened them that I could actually hear them, because I actually appreciated the effort that they went to, trying not to bother me with whatever they were working out. I had friends at school coming and complaining that their parents would fight, yell and scream, break dishes. And I realized very quickly how fortunate I was that I was sheltered from things like that. That night they woke me up. I couldn't tell what they were fighting about, and they moved around to multiple rooms in the house as they had their loud whisper argument. But the next day, I was no longer allowed to walk to school. I was told I wasn't allowed to ride my bike or catch the bus. Weekends with my friends had been cancelled until further notice. When I was to go to school, I'd have to get a ride with my mother as she went to work. I would wait until I got picked up by my dad after school. This was very frustrating for me. I thought I had already compromised enough, making sure that I was careful on my walk home, making sure I was observant and always aware of my surroundings. So I had to get used to the next few weeks being dropped off and picked up. My mother was the ride in the morning, my father in the afternoon. My father worked, but he worked from home. He was a very well-paid medical transcriptionist, and this worked out very well for us financially. I was starting to feel cooped up and rebellious with all the rules. So one weekend I told my parents that I was going to be working on a very important assignment and I didn't want anyone to interrupt me. I turned on some music softly, just loud enough that I knew it would hide the sound of my escape, but not loud enough that they would come and tell me to turn it down. By this time I had also watched the cameras enough that I knew how to evade them. I ended up running up the road to our local park. It wasn't very far away. Just like a 2-minute walk. I didn't even have any plans. I just wanted to be out of the house and in the air, away from the supervision of my parents. I wanted to sit in the sun and not be surrounded by my backyard. I was only there for about an hour before I started to feel this creeping feeling like I was being watched. I looked around and around and around, positive someone was watching me. And then there was a silhouette. I wasn't sure at the time if I was imagining it, but eventually I had convinced myself, and I was positive, that it was the man that somehow nobody knew watching me. I stood, and without a second thought, I sprinted all the way back home and snuck back in my window. Mum and Dad were none the wiser. I wanted to tell them that I thought someone was watching me, but I was too afraid. I thought that I would definitely be in trouble and I would have even more of my freedom taken away from me, since they knew that I had disobeyed them and snuck out. So instead I sat in my room, swearing to myself that I'd never do it again, that it was too scary, too dangerous. And then I got mad. Someone was messing with our lives. They had the nerve to make me scared. Then I suddenly wondered, why aren't the police doing anything about this? There's this person out there who thinks they have the right to mess with my life. Why aren't they getting caught? That's when I realized that I'd never actually seen my parents make a police report. I've never heard them talk about it. I've never heard them on the phone, seen them on the phone, never seen them writing a report or anything like that. So I decided to go ask. It was a mistake to ask. My father was actually instantly upset. "Of course we have," he yelled at me. "The police are just useless. Everyone knows that," he yelled. My mother was also looking furious, but she stayed silent. I was so shocked. They had never spoken to me so aggressively before. I started to cry. They seen what they had done, so they calmed down and they hugged me. They apologized and said it's just a stressful situation, that they're doing everything they can. A few days later, my mother got home late. She barged in the front door and it slammed behind her. She ran right into my father's arms and she was crying. He came again. He was hanging around the building. I couldn't leave. I feared he would see me. They didn't see me standing in the hallway when they were talking about it. I slowly and quietly made my way back to my room. I was fully aware that something else was happening behind the scenes, more than what I actually knew about it. But then things settled down for a little while again. Some months passed, there was no activity that I knew of. Our family actually started to feel happy again. I had forgotten all about my desires to go outside and play, to go to the shops with my friends on the weekends. After the fight with my mum and dad about the police, they bought me a PlayStation. I immersed myself in online environments. My friends from school even started to come and join me, and I met new friends as well. I felt like everything was finally getting back to normal. But just as I started to feel like that, my father and mother came and told me that they were actually putting the house up for sale and that we were going to have to leave. That set me right back off again. I didn't want to leave. I liked my school. Even though I didn't get to hang out with my friends outside of school, I got to see them in school, and that started to be enough. It pushed me over the edge, so I decided to take action myself. The very next day, after I was dropped off at school, I waited for Mum to drive around the corner, and then I went to the police station. I figured maybe they wouldn't care that I was out of school when I had something much more important to talk to them about. I thought maybe if they just knew how scared my family was, how much it was affecting our lives, maybe they would work harder and catch this guy. Maybe Mum and Dad were just too proud to talk about all the little instances that they needed to know. That he was hanging around her work, that she was coming home scared. And of course they didn't know about the park. I told no one. I went in and they asked me why I wasn't in school. I explained that I needed to add to an existing report and that they could drive me back afterwards if they wanted. They agreed. They took my report from start to finish. They wouldn't tell me anything about the existing case. They wouldn't tell me any details if they had any suspects. I knew nothing. They said that they wanted to talk to my parents. I told them, please don't. I don't want them to know that I skipped school to come here. I've broken their rules. They would be mad. They understood. I know I probably just sounded like a scared teen, and that's exactly what I was. Afraid of my parents' wrath. They were kind. They took me back to school. They said if they did anything, it would be delicate, and they wouldn't mention me. They drove me back to school, and the whole entire day I was just thinking about it. My imagination was going wild, that they wouldn't keep their promise. I would get home and be in trouble. Mum and Dad would be angry. I walked somewhere on my own. What happened to me if I got kidnapped, they would cry. But when I got picked up, Dad didn't say anything. In fact, it was not mentioned at all. For days, nothing changed. I realized that either the police had done it very, very delicately, or nothing's happened at all. I ended up deciding at the time that nothing had happened, that they'd just pushed my report across the desk and forgotten about it. Maybe the police really were just as bad as my father had promised. Mum must have been feeling a little bit closed in, because that weekend she decided that we needed to go to the movies. I got really excited too, because she said that she wanted to finally do my makeup. We hadn't done anything with it since we bought it on my 17th. We never got the opportunity, since we had kind of been locked in since that period. It started to feel really strange though. I felt it, but I didn't ask about it. It got really awkward because the amount of makeup that Mum was putting on me was more than I had seen anyone ever wear. It was really out of character considering all the things that she had drilled into me. It was so much that we actually looked like different people. We went out and we saw Avengers Infinity War. It was good, but the whole event was overshadowed by whatever it was that was not spoken. My mother felt fake. Her smile looked fake. Her laugh had rugged edges. My skin was itchy. I told her I wanted to take some of it off. She told me I couldn't, and that I had to wait until we got home. I told her it was fine. I brought some makeup wipes just in case I smudged it or something. She told me very firmly that I was not to touch my face. It occurred to me after that maybe we had gone out intentionally in disguise. I felt sick. My mother was scared to the point that she couldn't go out without disguising us. and here I was complaining about my itchy face. Not too long after that, Dad said we needed to start packing up the house, that he's found us something new. We were to pack everything up except for our bedrooms, and that when it came time to move, the removal company would finish the rest. I had started to accept the move at this point. As far as I could tell, the police were indeed as useless as my father promised. And if Mum was so scared that we couldn't leave the house without disguises, this was not a time for me to be childish and upset over it. I had to grow up and do what was needed to be done for the safety of our family. I had school the next day, and Dad was late picking me up. I was waiting for about 40 minutes before I attempted to call him. He didn't answer, so I left a message and started to walk. The walk wasn't a long walk, it was only like 10 minutes. But it was strange that Dad didn't arrive. I thought maybe he had lost track of time packing up the house and his phone was under a stack of books or something and he would see it eventually. I got home, but the automatic gate was open. I thought that was weird. I went up to the front door and it was unlocked. The door opened to an empty living room. Confusion and panic started to course through me, and I walked my way into the kitchen, which was also empty. I walked down the little hall to my parents' room, and that was also empty. I started to run into the garage, and both the cars were gone. I made my way to my room. It was completely untouched. I went back into the living room and I sat on the carpet and I cried for 3 hours with my phone in my lap as I tried calling my mum and my dad both on repeat. I eventually called the police. They only took 2 minutes, and over the next few days can only be described as absolute insanity. Turns out my parents were not my parents. I was actually the result of a black market adoption. I'd been stolen from my real parents when I was too little to remember. The man who was stalking us was actually my real father, who had left his old life behind trying to track us down over the last 12 years. My real mother had died from the stress and loss over the event. The people who raised me had actually abandoned me. They think that they had originally planned to take me with them, but the law was closing in. The case was getting stronger and they could feel the squeeze and they decided to run. It's only been a year since all this has happened. And of course I'm not over it. I will never be over it. I'm going to 5 sessions a week. My real father attends one of them. We have a chance to talk and get to know each other and talk about everything that happened. I'm sad. I'm angry. I'm confused. I miss them, and then I hate them. I don't understand my own feelings. I get angry at myself a lot, wishing I could see my mother and father, and then I remember and I get mad. I have to remind myself that they're not my mother and father. They never were. I just hope one day I can come to terms with all this and get over it and make a better life for myself.